A homeless woman began to sing in front of Buckingham Palace. The guard had 12 years of impeccable service. He had never broken protocol. But when she reached the final note, what he did left thousands of tourists speechless, and what they later discovered about her changed everything. But before that, tell me in the comments, do you believe everyone deserves a second chance? Subscribe to the channel because tomorrow there's another incredible story about the royal guards that will give you chills. The afternoon fog wrapped Buckingham Palace like a gray veil, bringing that damp cold typical of October in London. Guard Thomas Mackenzie would complete exactly 12 years of service today, 4,380 days, without a single breach of protocol, without a single slip. His record was so clean that recruits studied his trajectory in discipline classes. 2 tours in Iraq, 3 years in Northern Ireland, and now there he was, motionless like the very stones of the palace, wearing that scarlet uniform that weighed more than most people imagined. He knew every sound of that courtyard, the click-click of cameras, the dragging feet of tired tourists, the murmur in dozens of different languages, the forced laughter of people trying to make the guard smile. He had seen it all. People in costumes, people fooling around, even a guy who spent 2 hours imitating his posture. Nothing shook him. Nothing until that afternoon. It was almost 4 in the afternoon when Mackenzie noticed a different kind of agitation in the crowd. It wasn't the normal excitement of tourists. It was something more uncomfortable. People stepping back, looks of disapproval, an American family pulling their children toward the opposite side of the gate. Out of the corner of his eye, because a royal guard never turns his head but sees everything, he caught the reason. A woman was crossing the crowd of tourists with that typical hesitation of someone who is no longer sure they belong in public places. She must have been in her early 50s, maybe younger. The street ages you fast. She carried 2 torn plastic bags, a battered military coat that had seen better days, and wore a faded wool beanie even though the cold wasn't that intense. But it wasn't her appearance that caught Mackenzie's attention. It was the way she moved. She had an odd posture for someone on the streets, her back too straight, her steps measured despite the obvious fatigue. And there was something in her eyes, something he recognized but couldn't name yet. "Mom, why is that lady dirty?" a child asked, with that honesty only kids have. "Shh, don't point," the mother whispered, pulling the child away. "That's not polite." A palace security guard approached, with that slightly hurried walk of someone who wants to solve a problem before it becomes a bigger one. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask that—" "I'm not going to cause trouble," she interrupted. Her voice came out hoarse, a little broken, as if it hadn't been used much lately. I just need a moment." She had a classic British accent, the kind you learn in private schools, not on the streets. The guard hesitated, looked around, assessing the situation. Tourists watching everything with that social media curiosity. Everyone already with phones raised, waiting for drama. "Look, we have rules and—" the guard continued. "Please." She said it so softly it was barely audible. "Just 5 minutes. I promise." There was something in the way she said it. It wasn't the plea of someone begging. It was something else. Dignity, perhaps, or what was left of it. The guard sighed. "All right. But no trouble, okay? And keep your distance from the guard." She nodded, clutching the bags to her chest, as if they were the only solid thing in a world that wouldn't stop collapsing. Mackenzie watched everything without moving a muscle. 12 years of training. But something stirred inside. That strange feeling when you're about to witness something that will stay with you for a long time afterward. The woman positioned herself about 5 meters from Mackenzie's post. much farther than tourists usually stood, as if she knew exactly where the limit of protocol was. She closed her eyes for a long moment. Her hands trembled, maybe from the cold, maybe from nervousness, maybe both. She placed the bags on the ground with a strange care, almost reverent, straightened her shoulders, took 3 deep breaths, and then she began to sing. The first note came out shaky, insecure, but there was something there. Even broken, even hoarse from disuse, there was something in that voice that made the entire courtyard fall silent. It was O mio babbino caro, Puccini's aria that anyone who has ever watched a dramatic movie recognizes even without knowing the name. Tourists who were talking stopped mid-sentence. Cameras that had been filming the guards all turned toward her. An elderly couple who were leaving literally stopped and came back. Because that wasn't a homeless woman singing. It was a soprano. Her voice had range. It had technique. It had years of training embedded in every note. Even mistreated by life on the streets, by the cold, by probable malnutrition, it still carried fragments of something extraordinary. Mackenzie felt every hair on his body stand up inside the uniform. He had grown up listening to opera. His mother was obsessed. She forced him and his siblings to watch broadcasts from the Royal Opera House every Saturday. He complained, rolled his eyes, but absorbed it all without realizing it. He recognized real talent when he heard it. And that was real talent. Destroyed, wounded, but undeniably real. The crowd had tripled. People were leaving the subway station and already heard the music floating through the foggy London air. They came running. In 2 minutes, there must have been about 200 people in a semicircle around her. No one spoke. Some cried openly. A Japanese girl had her hand over her mouth, tears streaming. A man in a suit, probably coming from work, dropped his briefcase on the ground, completely hypnotized. The woman sang with her eyes closed. Tears ran down her dirty face, leaving clean trails on her skin. Her hands no longer trembled. They moved with grace, as if she were on a real stage, under real spotlights, being applauded by real audiences. For a moment, she wasn't on the street. She was back somewhere she had once been someone. Mackenzie felt something tighten in his chest. That horrible feeling when you realize you're witnessing not just beauty, but tragedy. Because the more beautiful her voice sounded, the more obvious it became what she had lost. When she reached the vorrei mourir part, the notes rising, reaching that impossible high register, something broke inside Mackenzie. 12 years, 4,380 days. He had never broken protocol. But there are moments when protocol becomes just a word. The woman's sustained final note was still echoing in the air when Mackenzie did something he had never done. He moved his hand. It was subtle. Only those paying attention saw it. But it was deliberate. He clapped. Once, twice, 3 times. The sound of leather gloves striking each other cut through the post-music silence. The crowd collectively gasped. Several people literally covered their mouths. Because everyone knew, absolutely everyone there knew, that royal guards do not do that. They do nothing. It's like the statues of Easter Island deciding to get up and dance. But Mackenzie wasn't finished. He turned, made the full movement, and faced the woman directly while continuing to applaud. The reaction was instant. As if he had given permission to the rest of the world, the crowd exploded into applause. It wasn't that polite classical concert applause. It was a standing ovation, shouts, whistles, clapping that hurt your hands. The woman slowly opened her eyes, as if waking from a dream and afraid that reality would hurt too much. When she saw the guard applauding, the guard, that ultimate symbol of protocol and rigidity, she collapsed. She fell to her knees right there on the cold ground, covered her face with her hands and began to sob. That kind of cry of years, of loss, tears that externalized her suffering. Mackenzie broke another protocol. He left his post, walked toward her with those heavy boots making noise on the stone floor. The crowd opened a path, quiet again, no one daring to disturb that sacred moment with a single word. He knelt in front of her, removed his white gloves with precise movements, and extended his hand. "That was one of the most beautiful performances I've ever heard in my life," he said. His deep voice, trained to give orders, now soft like velvet. "And I grew up going to the Royal Opera House." She looked at the outstretched hand, as if it were a miracle she didn't dare touch, for fear it would evaporate. I can't," she whispered. "Look at me. I'm no longer—" "You are an artist," he interrupted firmly, "and artists deserve respect, always." Slowly, with a trembling hand, she accepted the handshake. His hand was warm, solid, real. He helped her stand carefully, as if she were made of glass. And then, to everyone's absolute shock, he made a stage bow, the one the audience gives the artist at the end of the performance. The crowd lost their minds. People were crying, recording, calling friends. That was going to go viral within hours. But the story doesn't end there. An elegant woman in her 60s, wearing a very expensive wool coat, and an air of someone who's used to being in charge, cut through the crowd to make space. She had that manner of someone accustomed to being heard. "Elizabeth?" Her voice came out a little shaky. "Elizabeth Ashford, is that you?" The woman who sang, Elizabeth, apparently, turned so fast she almost stumbled. Her face went through 20 emotions in 2 seconds. Recognition, shame, fear, surprise. "Margaret?" she whispered. The elegant woman covered her mouth with both hands, eyes wide. My God, we all thought you had died?" Elizabeth gave a bitter laugh. "No, just disappeared." Margaret stepped forward without hesitation and hugged Elizabeth tightly. A real hug. Of desperation and relief, and 20 years of accumulated guilt. "I looked for you," Margaret said against her shoulder. "When I found out what happened, I searched for months. But you vanished completely." "I was ashamed," Elizabeth confessed, her voice full of guilt. "I lost everything, Margaret. The house, the career, the dignity. How was I supposed to show up in front of you like this?" Mackenzie watched, still kneeling, trying to process what the hell was happening. Margaret stepped back, holding Elizabeth by the shoulders, studying her face as if rereading a favorite book after years. "You sang at the Royal Albert Hall," Margaret said to the crowd, turning as if everyone needed to know. "3 times, with the London Philharmonic. You were one of the most promising sopranos of the 90s. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. People pulling out phones, probably already searching. "I was," Elizabeth repeated, the word carrying the weight of a lost universe. "Before the accident, before the throat injuries, before the medications that got me addicted trying to deal with the pain, before losing everything." "And you still sing like this," Mackenzie said, finally finding his voice. "Even after everything." Elizabeth looked at him, really looked, for the first time. "Music is the only thing no one can take from you," she said simply. "Not the street, not hunger, not shame. When I sing for a few minutes, I go back to being who I was, or who I should have been." Margaret was already digging in her purse. She took out her phone, dialed with quick fingers. "Richard, it's me. I need you to come to Buckingham Palace right now. Yes, now. I found Elizabeth. Yes, that Elizabeth. No, I'm not crazy, just come." She hung up and looked at Elizabeth with that frightening determination of people who have resources and connections. Richard runs a rehabilitation program for artists experiencing homelessness. He'll help. I can't accept charity, Elizabeth began, but Margaret cut her off with a gesture. This isn't charity. It's what you deserve, always deserved. The crowd had grown even thicker. Some news crews began to appear, reporters pushing microphones, people bumping into each other to get the best angle, everyone wanting a piece of that story. Mackenzie stood up, resuming his military posture out of habit. But something had changed. He was no longer just the immobile guard. He was a witness, a participant, part of that crazy story no one would believe. That's when he noticed more guards had approached. 3 of them. 2 he knew from the battalion, Jenkins and O'Connor, and a 3rd he only saw from afar, all in perfect formation, motionless like statues. But then Jenkins did something extraordinary. He also began to applaud. Slowly, deliberately. The white gloves striking each other just like Thomas's earlier. O'Connor followed. Then the 3rd guard. Then 2 more who came from adjacent posts. 6 royal guards, ultimate symbols of British discipline, breaking protocol simultaneously. For a homeless woman singing opera. The crowd didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Many did both at the same time. Cameras captured everything. That was definitely going to go down in history. A BBC reporter managed to get closer. Microphone extended. Ma'am, what are you feeling right now? Elizabeth wiped her face with the back of her dirty hand. Tried to speak, but her voice failed. Tried again. I feel seen, she finally managed to say. For the first time in years, I feel seen. Not as trash, not as a problem, as a person, as an artist, as human. The word human came out carrying so much weight that the reporter had to turn his face away to hide his own emotion. Margaret was already on the phone again, making more calls, mobilizing her network of high society London contacts. A woman who knew people, and she would use every connection to make sure Elizabeth had not just shelter, but a future. Sarah? It's Margaret Whitmore. Yes, that Margaret. Listen, I need a favor. No, 3 favors. First, a spot in your program. Second, a good therapist. Not those cheap ones from the public system. Third, I need someone from the Royal Academy of Music to evaluate her vocal cords. What do you mean, who? Turn on the TV. Any channel. It's live. Meanwhile, an officer of the Royal Guard opened a path through the crowd, face red, clearly coming to deliver a monumental scolding. Soldier Mackenzie, his voice thundered. What the hell do you think you're... But he stopped when he saw the scene. Elizabeth surrounded by people offering help. Margaret coordinating like a general. The crowd in silent reverence. The 6 guards still applauding in perfect synchrony, as if it were part of some official ceremony he had missed. And Mackenzie standing there, with that expression of someone who knew exactly what he had done, and why. The officer, Colonel Matthews, a 30-year veteran, opened his mouth, closed it, looked at the other guards, looked at Elizabeth, looked at the cameras capturing every second of it. He was military to the bone. Protocol ran in his veins. But he had also been young once. He had also had moments when rules seemed too small to contain what the situation demanded. Conversation in my office after the shift, he muttered to Mackenzie, but without the earlier fury. Then, so low only Mackenzie heard. It was the right thing to do, soldier, even if it was the wrong thing according to the manual, because even he realized. Some moments are bigger than regulations. A man in his 40s, neatly trimmed red beard, approached Elizabeth carefully. He had that musician look. Slightly mismatched, but expensive clothes, relaxed posture. "Excuse me," he said. Sorry to interrupt. My name is David Chen. I'm musical director of the South Bank Center. He handed her a card. I heard you sing, and I'd very much like to talk about the possibility of you doing a performance. A real one. Stage, lighting, orchestra if you want. Not charity. Work. You have talent that deserves to be heard. Elizabeth took the card with trembling hands, looked at it as if it were written in alien language. I don't know if I can. It's been so long, and my voice is... Your voice is honest, David gently interrupted. I work with perfect singers every day. Impeccable technique, total control, everything by the book. And you know what most of them lack? What you have? Soul. History. Real pain transformed into something transcendent. You don't need to be perfect. You need to be authentic. And you are. More people began to approach. A singing teacher offering free lessons, a dentist offering treatment, a stylist offering clothes, a lawyer offering help to resolve pending legal issues. Everyone wanted to ride a little on the wave of the new British star. It was as if the entire city had decided that that woman would not fall again. Not under their watch. Mackenzie watched everything with something tight in his chest. That feeling of having made a real difference. Not the kind of, I killed enemies in Iraq, but the kind of, I changed a life for the better. It was deeper and more lasting. Jenkins approached him, already back at attention but speaking out of the corner of his mouth. You're going to get a serious dressing down for this, Mac. I know. Worth it? Mackenzie looked at Elizabeth, surrounded by hope and possibilities for the first time in years, probably. Every second. O'Connor chuckled quietly from the other side. Spoke like a poet, you sentimental fool. But Mackenzie knew they had made the same choice. They had seen the same thing he had, recognized something that transcended regulation. Margaret finally hung up the phone and turned to Elizabeth with that smile of someone who had just moved mountains. Okay, I got you a spot in a fantastic residential program in Kensington. Starts Monday. 3 months of housing, food, therapy, all covered by donations. And Dr. James will examine your vocal cords tomorrow. He's the best laryngologist in London. Worked with Pavarotti in his later years. Elizabeth could only nod, unable to process everything. Why? She finally asked. Why are you doing this? I'm not anyone. Margaret held her face with both hands. You are Elizabeth Ashford. You are my friend. You are a brilliant artist who had bad luck. And no one deserves to be forgotten just because they stumbled. That was when an older woman in the crowd, with that heavy East End accent, shouted, She's right, love. You sang better than any of those posh girls at Covent Garden. We're not going to let you go back to the street. Other voices joined in. That's right. We take care of our own. London doesn't forget. Mackenzie felt a shiver. That was the city waking up. It was collective humanity deciding that no, not today. Today, we do things differently. A boy about 10 years old, who had watched everything with wide eyes, slipped out of his mother's hand and ran up to Elizabeth. He held out a slightly crushed cookie he had in his pocket. For you, he said shyly, because you sing beautifully. Elizabeth took the cookie as if it were made of gold. She knelt down to the boy's height, tears falling again down her face. Thank you, dear. That means more than you can imagine. The boy smiled, a little awkwardly, and ran back to his mother, who was crying too. It was small moments like that, stacked on top of one another, that built what was happening there. It wasn't just about music. It was about a city. A hard, cold, gray city, remembering it still had a heart. 3 months later, Mackenzie received a letter. Expensive paper. Elegant handwriting. Dear Thomas, I hope it isn't too bold to call you that. I don't have words that do justice to the gratitude I feel. That afternoon, when you applauded, you didn't just recognize my music. You recognized my humanity in a moment when I had almost forgotten I still had it. I'm living in a modest flat now, with help from Margaret's program. I do 3 therapy sessions a week. I sing every day, even if only for myself. My vocal cords are recovering. The doctors say that, with time, I can perform professionally again. Small theaters first. Maybe one day. But it's not about going back to being who I was. It's about discovering who I can be now. With the scars, with the story, with the humility that only the street teaches. I'm due to present a small recital next month, by invitation only. I would love it if you could attend. Not in uniform, just as Thomas, the man who reminded me that there are still people willing to break rules when humanity demands it. With eternal gratitude, Elizabeth. Mackenzie kept the letter in the inner pocket of his uniform, right near his heart. He received an official reprimand for breaking protocol. He was put on extra duty for a month. Some colleagues teased him, saying he had gone soft. But every time he passed the spot where Elizabeth had sung, he found himself smiling inside. Because in the end, he had done exactly what he swore to do when he entered the service. Protect, serve, honor. Only sometimes honoring means choosing the person instead of the rule. It means seeing beyond the uniform, both the one you wear and the one life puts on people. It means understanding that the greatest strength isn't staying motionless in front of everything, but knowing exactly when to move. That October afternoon, the most disciplined guard at Buckingham broke protocol, and by doing so, he helped repair a life. The video of Elizabeth singing went viral. More than 50 million views in a week. People shared it with captions like, "Faith in humanity restored," and "When a royal guard breaks protocol, you know it's serious." But what no one expected was that the story would go even further. A music producer in Los Angeles saw the video. He had worked with Elizabeth in the 90s, when she had done that frustrating tour across the United States, the one that should have launched her international career, but ended up being overshadowed by manager problems and bad contracts. He called. He offered a contract to record an album. Nothing extravagant. An indie project, honest and raw. Elizabeth Ashford, the voice that came back from the ashes. The idea was to document her journey. The scars in her voice became texture. The story became strength. Margaret cried when Elizabeth told her. "You deserve this," she said, holding her friend's hands. "Always deserved." But Elizabeth hesitated. "What if I fail again? What if my voice can't handle it? What if—" "And what if it works?" Margaret interrupted. "What if you show everyone that starting over is possible? That no matter how deep you fell, you can always climb back up?" On the day of recording the first single, Elizabeth asked the producer for one thing. She wanted Mackenzie there. Not to appear, just to be present, to close the circle. He went in civilian clothes, jeans, gray sweater, hands in his pockets. No one would recognize the imposing guard in that ordinary-looking guy sitting at the back of the studio. When Elizabeth entered the booth, she looked through the glass and waved to him. Mackenzie waved back, feeling something strange in his chest. Pride, maybe? Or that good feeling of knowing you made a real difference in someone's life. The first note she sang still had that fragility, but it carried a lot of strength, too. The voice of someone who knows rock bottom and decided to climb back up. The American producer, a 40-year industry veteran, wiped his eyes with no shame at all. "That's pure gold," he murmured to the sound engineer. "You can't manufacture that authenticity." 6 months after the incident at Buckingham Palace, Elizabeth gave her first public performance. A small theater in Camden, capacity for 200 people. Tickets sold out in 3 hours. Mackenzie was in the audience. 5th row. Margaret had saved the seat for him. When the lights dimmed and Elizabeth walked onto the stage, short hair but growing, body still thin but stronger, simple dress but clean, the applause was immediate. People stood up before she even sang a note. She waited for the silence to return, took a deep breath, and began with the same song, O mio babino caro. The song that had changed everything that cold October afternoon. But this time her voice was steadier, fuller. It still carried the marks of suffering, but now they were part of the beauty, not a flaw. When she finished, the theater exploded. Mackenzie applauded until his hands hurt. Elizabeth searched for him in the audience, found his eyes, and made a small bow just for him. After the show, backstage, she hugged him. "Thank you," she whispered, "for seeing me when no one else did." "You were always there," Mackenzie replied. "You just needed someone to remind you of that." Today, Elizabeth teaches singing to young people in vulnerable situations. She performs regularly in small theaters. She never returned to the stardom of the 90s, but she doesn't want that either. She found something better. Purpose. And Mackenzie? He's still a guard. He still stands motionless at his post. He still takes protocol seriously. But now, whenever he sees someone the crowd ignores, someone invisible, someone forgotten, he pays attention. Because he learned that sometimes the greatest courage isn't remaining firm, but knowing when it's time to move. And that humanity never breaks protocol. Humanity is the most important protocol of all. That October afternoon, the most disciplined guard at Buckingham broke a rule. And by doing so, he helped repair a life, inspired millions of people, and reminded the world that redemption is always possible. Night fell over London as the crowd finally began to disperse. But before leaving, dozens of people left money at Elizabeth's feet. 5, 10, 20-pound notes. Even a man in a suit left a 50-pound note. It wasn't alms. It was recognition. It was investment in a story they wanted to have a happy ending. Mackenzie eventually returned to his post. The heavy boots found the mark on the ground his feet had left in 12 years of service. The rifle returned to position, the eyes fixed forward. But he was no longer the same guard. None of them were. In the days that followed, the story exploded in a way no one could predict. The video got 20 million views in the first 24 hours. Then 50 million. Then it lost count. Newspapers around the world published, "Royal Guard breaks protocol for talented homeless woman." The moment that made London cry. When humanity beats the rules. TV shows wanted to interview Mackenzie. He refused them all. It wasn't about him, it never was. But he agreed to go on a show with Elizabeth, as long as the focus was on her story, on her music. When they sat on the studio couch, with those strong lights and the host asking carefully scripted questions, it was Elizabeth who surprised everyone. "I want to clarify something," she said, interrupting a question about her inspiring journey. "I'm not a comeback story yet. I'm in the middle of it. There are days I wake up and still feel like trash. There are nights I dream I'm back on the street, freezing under a bridge. That doesn't go away because someone gave you a chance. But," she looked at Mackenzie, "but having someone see you when you're invisible, that gives you strength to keep fighting, even on the bad days." The host, a 30-year television veteran who thought he'd seen everything, had to pause to pull himself together. Mackenzie looked at her with genuine respect. "Getting shot in Iraq was easier than what you went through. I know that. Physical pain ends. But having to rebuild who you are from scratch, that's a different category of courage." Social media exploded again. That specific clip, Mackenzie comparing military combat with Elizabeth's battle, went viral separately. People shared it with captions about respect, about recognizing different kinds of strength. 3 weeks later, at the appointment with Dr. James, the news was mixed. The vocal cords suffered significant damage, the doctor explained, showing the images on a computer. Probably from the intubation when you had that severe pneumonia, and the trauma from the accident, but... He smiled. But you have a privileged anatomy. With intensive vocal therapy, specific exercises, and great care, you may recover maybe 70–80% of the original capacity. And the other 20%? Elizabeth asked. We'll make you a different singer. Not necessarily worse, just different. Billie Holiday never had a technically perfect voice. Neither did Edith Piaf. But they had something technical perfection can't buy. Margaret, who had insisted on going along, squeezed Elizabeth's hand. Did you hear that? You're going to sing again. But the path wasn't all roses. There were relapses. Nights when Elizabeth disappeared from the residential program and Margaret had to go looking through the streets, finding her curled up in an alley, having a panic attack. I don't deserve this, Elizabeth would say, trembling. I don't deserve you spending time and money on me. I'm a lost cause. No one is a lost cause, Margaret replied, every time. No one. Mackenzie visited when he could. He brought tea. Sometimes he just sat in silence, simply present, because he had learned in Iraq that sometimes presence is worth more than words. On one of those visits, Elizabeth asked, "Why did you do that? You knew it would cause trouble, that it would stain your perfect record." Mackenzie stayed quiet for a while. Then he said, "In Afghanistan, I saw an Afghan boy, must have been about 12, running through bullets to save his little sister who had fallen. My colleagues and I were following protocol. Don't get involved with civilians during combat. But an older soldier, a guy who had 30 years of service, threw protocol out the window. He ran out, grabbed both children, brought them to a safe area. He took 3 shots in the process. He survived, but barely." He looked at Elizabeth. He told me afterward, "Regulations exist to keep you alive in most situations, but sometimes being human is more important than being a perfect soldier." I never forgot that. Elizabeth wiped away a tear. "And you think I was worth it?" "You were there, vulnerable, giving everything you still had, sharing beauty in a world that had only been cruel to you. Of course you were worth it." "And you? What would you have done in Guard Mackenzie's place? Sometimes is following the rules more important than helping someone? Or are there moments when humanity needs to come before protocol?" Leave your opinion in the comments. I want to know what you really think. If this story touched you in any way, and you made it this far, comment "Broken Protocol" so I can leave a heart. Also leave that cheeky like, and share it with someone who needs to be reminded that it's never too late to start over. Subscribe to the channel and turn on the bell because there are more incredible stories about the Royal Guards and the throne coming. Stories that will make you laugh, cry, and question everything you thought you knew about duty and honor. And always remember, rules exist to guide us, but the heart exists to remind us when it's time to choose differently.